Hi there and welcome back to 355 Code. Today we're going to be continuing our paint clone tutorial. So if you watched last time's video, then you learned how to make a basic drawing function. So we basically replicated what a pencil or a paintbrush would do in regular paint. And today what we're going to work on is drawing shapes. So to get us started, basically I've copied over our HTML boilerplate code and I left here the beginning of the code from last time, which basically just builds our first canvas and our paint board. I made it a little smaller, and as you see, we've also moved over to a different online code box kind of website because we had some requests for a white background. And today what we're going to try and implement is a shape function, as I said. So we already kind of know how to make shapes using Canvas because our background here, this blue square, is a shape in itself. But we want the shape to be created customly. So we want the user to be able to decide how large the shape will be. So the basic way to do that will be that we will start the shape where the user clicks and then end the shape where the user releases the mouse. So the first thing that we're going to have to do is to pick up when the user clicks down. So let's add a first event listener to our canvas. And this event listener will listen for mouse down. Okay, you could also use click here, but we're going to use mouse down. And it's going to execute a function which takes the event as a parameter. And basically the first thing that we're going to want to do is, sorry, we don't need this arrow, sorry, instinct. We don't need that here because we declared the function. It's a named function, and basically the first thing that we're going to want to do is to find our X and Y coordinates for the mouse when we click down, because that's where our shape is going to start. So what we'll do is we will declare these outside of the event listener first, because I have a feeling, I have a hunch that we will need these variables in several of our event listeners. So let's call this start shape X, and right, we'll start it off just with a value of 0, and we'll also declare start shape Y. Whoops, typo already. And also with a value of 0. And then basically inside of our event listener, we will give each of them a value, and it'll be equal to, if you remember from last time, we just need to get the X coordinates from the event of the mouse down. And we'll do the same for the Y. Client Y. Excellent. Okay, great. So now that we got our coordinates, we basically want to move our paintboard starter point to those coordinates. So if you remember how to do that, it's basically paintboard dot move to, and then we just put in our shape X, start shape X and start shape Y coordinates. So now if we run our code, nothing happens because we haven't told the code to draw anything yet, and that is kind of what we expected. So now let's add another event listener that will basically tell us when the mouse comes back up. So, and this is going to be for mouse up, and we're going to add a function here which will also pick up on our X and Y coordinates, and let's call this end shape. And I'm doing the same, declaring it outside, because I have a feeling we might need this in the future for several event listeners. Okay, great. So we have, and then I'm going to actually copy this code here. I know it's a big no-no to copy code, but I do it all the time. I prefer deal with bugs than writing a lot, so that's my personal preference. But if you don't like dealing with bugs, you can try writing all the code from scratch. So now basically what we did is we got our end shape coordinates from the mouse up, and now we're actually going to want to draw our shape. So our shape will be just a square or a rectangle. So don't forget, we need to declare our fill style, and we'll just make the shapes black so we can see them on the blue. And we are going to fill a rectangle. And if you remember, that's just the fill rect function. And we're going to give it coordinates. So this is the tricky part. So the coordinates that we're going to give it are our start shape and coordinates, right? Start shape x and start shape y. And we are going to tell it to, now we have to basically tell it how many pixels wide and how many pixels tall this rectangle is going to be. And we're going to do that by calculating the distance between our end shape and our start shape. So basically what we want to do is declare another variable, and that will be, let's say, shape x, let shape x, and let shape y. And basically these are going to be equal to end shape minus start shape. And basically by that we are calculating the distance. You could also do this inside. You could also do this inside of the fill rectangle, but just for the sake of clarity and just not having one very long line, we're going to do it over there. Great. So now we wrote out our code. Let's give it a test. So I click down and I drag and I click up. Let's try that again. Nothing happens. Okay, now is the part where we figure out where our mistake is. So after taking a look at our code, I found the typo, and that would be here that we are subtracting end shape from end shape. This actually needs to be start shape. So let's try running that again. And now we see that we are drawing a rectangle. So that's pretty good. I mean, that's probably, 90% of the functionality that we were looking for. With a sharp eye, you might have noticed we have another problem, that our rectangles are not starting in the right place. So after looking over the code again, I found here that here we have start shape y instead of start shape x. And now after I change that and I run the code, we can see that the rectangle is always starting in the right spot. So this is great. This is more than halfway done because we have our shapes. So we filled our basic requirement, but it's not so user-friendly because I can't really see what my shape is going to look like while I'm drawing it out, which is kind of basic functionality of one of these paint applications. So basically what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add a kind of outline of the square or rectangle that we're drawing. as we're dragging out our mouse. And the way we're going to do that is by basically drawing a hollow shape when we drag our mouse. So for this, we're going to need an event listener that basically tells us when the mouse is moving, right? So when the mouse is moving, so that's mouse move, and we are going to add a function, function, and this function is basically going to draw a hollow shape. And the way we can do this is by using something that's called stroke rect instead of fill rect. So this basically let's declare a fill color. So that'll be fill style, and that will be equal to black. And let's build a stroke rect, and the coordinates will be the same as our fill rect here from the bottom. So let's take that from over here. Sorry, that should go inside over here. And now let's see what happens when we run our code. So here in the console, because shape X and shape Y are not defined because we define them here and the event listener on the bottom. So let's think for a second what we actually want to happen here. And what we want is for this event listener to build a shape from our starting point until wherever the mouse is at that given moment. So what we can do is actually just declare a new X and Y coordinates. So let's call it mouse X and mouse Y. And this will be equal to event.clientX, and you can see here that it has the event crossed out because I didn't add it here into the function. And we'll do the same for Y, okay? And that'll be event.clientY. Excellent. And now what we're going to do is use this mouse X and mouse Y over here. Excellent. And now let's try running our code again. And you can see that we have a lot of shapes, but this is not exactly what we want. So what do we want to do? We only want this mouse move to start recording our movement only after we press down. So what we're going to do is we're going to declare another variable here on top, and that will be called mouse down. And we'll start it off at false. And what we're going to want to do is that after we click or press the mouse down, we're going to want to make mouse down equal to true. And after we release the mouse, we'll just put that back as false. Excellent. And now everything that we do within mouse move is only going to be on the condition that mouse is down. And remember, this basically is the same as mouse down equals true. And we'll put that all within the if statement. Okay, and now let's check out our code again. So moving the mouse without clicking, nothing's happening. Excellent. Click down, move mouse. Okay, we are getting a very weirdly shaped rectangle. So basically, what's happening here is that I made a mistake when I told it how large we want the rectangles to be, because I told it just to use mouse X. So basically it's getting the X value of wherever I click down, and that's how large it's making the shape, where actually we want to implement something more like this shape X and shape Y. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually copy this entire line here and put it right over here, because this is actually the same exact functionality that we want to implement. And I'm going to also copy these two lines where we define the size of the shape, and just instead of N shape here, we're going to have mouse. So this is going to be mouse X, and this is going to be mouse Y. And let's see what that does for us. So now, okay, we basically see that we're getting a full shape, which is not what we want, and that's because I copied this line, and we want this actually to be stroke rect, and run that again. And now we see shapes that lines, and I let go, and it fills the shape. So this is cool, but this is not what we want, right? Because we don't want this outline of the shape to stay after we move away. We actually want it to disappear. And for this, we're going to have to get a little clever. So basically what we want to do is to create another shape right on top of the outline so that it disappears basically right after we move, or a few seconds later, even less, a few milliseconds later. So for that, we're going to use something called a timeout function. And basically, right after we draw this rectangle, we're going to set a timeout. And the timeout takes a function. And this function basically is going to build a shape that's going to cover our old shape. So for that, we'll use the fill style of blue so that it basically looks like our background. And if we were building a more complex application, we might want to use variables for our fill styles and then change the fill style based on what the current background is, etc. But for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to use blue here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fill the rectangle. And what we're going to want to fill it with is basically a rectangle that's the same exact rectangle as this up here. And let's just copy that. And now we'll want to define our timeout. So let's choose like a really short amount of time. So this is in milliseconds here. So that's 50. And now let's run our code and see what happens. Shape X is not defined in our timeout. So let's copy this. And, oh, okay, so now I see where the problem is. I had built the timeout outside of the if statement, which we actually want it to be on the inside. So let's copy, let's copy that and put that over here. So this is how it should look. And now let's run it again. And okay, so we're getting pretty close. As we drag, we can see that we're really getting only basically the outline. And then when we let go, it fills the shape. It's a little buggy, right? Because we're kind of have these outlines that are still staying around. So what we're going to do is try and make our this fill rectangle, which is supposed to cover our old rectangle, we're going to try and make it a little bigger so that it really fully covers. So to do that, let's try adding just a pixel to each of these values. And we'll do that for the end of the shape as well. And let's take a look at how that looks. so let's run that code again. And as we draw, okay, so it's getting better. As you see, it's a little less buggy than before. We still have some problems here, and that is because I added a pixel. So basically I made this shape start further down and further to the right, and actually I wanted to take off a pixel because I want to go up and to the left. So let's change this to minus for the starting point. Great, and now let's run that code again. And pretty good, pretty good. So now because I moved my starting point, we're going to want to add more pixels here to the ending point. So let's add another pixel to each of this and run that again. And pretty good. So you can see that as we drag, we kind of get an outline of the shape, and then only when we release, it draws the shape. You can see that it's still not 100%. There are some bugs. It's not perfect. But this is very, very close to the functionality of basic shape drawing. As you can see, we can't really overlay shapes so well because we kind of have this slight cutout over here. And sometimes we get bugs where it doesn't really draw our shape as we wanted it. So these are all things that we would work out further on when we were building our code. And to really implement this kind of shape functionality, we would probably need to build layers so that each shape is really on its own canvas that could be manipulated in its own way. But that's a lot more complex than this. So if you've been watching, then that means in about half an hour, you have built a basic shape drawing functionality using pretty much pure JavaScript. And this is the second installment of our paint clone tutorial. Thank you for watching. If you want to follow along and see how we implement other paint functionalities, you can subscribe to our channel. We also have lots of other cool JavaScript tutorials and explanations, so you should really check that out. You could also find us on Facebook and Instagram. And thanks for watching. See you next time.